At Wild Green Primary, they've been running a crime scene investigation to engage Year 6 in science. A shed's been broken into and 2 trophies stolen.
We are very busy at Sutton Police at the moment, and maybe sometime during the inquiry you guys might be able to pitch in with some help.
They've had help from Jane Turner from the Science Learning Centre and the support of the local police and a scenes of crime officer. The children have had to behave as real forensic scientists, gathering, examining and recording evidence and interviewing the suspects.
Do you have any injuries which you've received lately?
I've hurt my finger.
A lot of opinions exist about who committed the crime, but so far, no evidence has proved conclusive.
I think Mr. Barnett did it.
I think Miss Murphy and Miss Coton did it.
I think all of them did it.
As evidence was planted by the teachers to link all 5 suspects to the crime scene, Year 6 have carried out DNA testing of the bloodstain and each suspect to prove whose blood was found at the scene.
So we've got in here DNA from all of our suspects, plus from the crime scene. Now,
it's the final day of the crime scene investigation, and Year 6 have gathered to hear all the evidence and the decisive DNA results.
What we're going to do now is we're going to bring those suspects in and we're going to see what they've got to say for themselves. Can you go to the far end, please? Tell me who you suspect has done the crime and a little bit about what evidence you have.
We think it was Mrs. Coton because we found some of her fibre in the shed.
Would we be able to match that in some way to some of her clothing?
Yeah, because when she came in the next day, she had a big rip in her shirt.
It wasn't me, it's a frame-up.
It's a frame-up. And what about the evidence?
Could rip my T-shirt anywhere.
OK. Suspect number 2.
We think it's Mr. Barnett because he was the last person out of school, and he said that he's got a cut on his finger because he was going to go out on his bike, but he's got a plaster on his foot.
So there's some suspicion there, the fact that he may not be telling you the truth there, that he's out riding his bike.
Yeah.
And you say he's got a cut on his finger. What's the significance of that?
There's some blood on the shed door.
I'm the head teacher of Wild Green Primary School. What possible motive could I have for breaking into a shed?
Well, we shall see what the evidence finds.
Indeed we shall.
Suspect number 3.
We think it's Mr. Evans because his footprints match the footprints outside, and he did have a cut on his hand.
So again, Mr. Evans has got a cut on his hands, which could have been caused during the incident itself, which may well have left some blood at the scene, which we recovered. And you're saying that those footprints match the ones found at the crime scene to your suspect. Well, that's good evidence as well, isn't it?
I was at the shed in the evening because I needed to get my light fixed by Mr. Bob, so that could explain away any possible evidence that was there at the shed. I've got no interest in any trophies in that shed, and it certainly was not me.
Moving on to Mr. Bob, suspect number 4.
We think it's Mr. Bob because his fingerprints were on a ginger beer can that was left in the shed, and he might have wanted the insurance money for breaking in.
Might have wanted the insurance money, for golfing gear. And you found his fingerprints on the can, which was inside the shed. Could those fingerprints have been there for legitimate reasons?
It might have been left there for quite a long time.
It could well be there from before the incident, couldn't it? And if that was Mr. Bob's can, his fingerprints would be on it anyway, wouldn't they?
Not guilty.
Just not guilty?
Not guilty.
Nothing else to say?
Nothing else to say.
And our final suspect?
We think Miss Murphy did the crime. When we found a shopping list, we did chromatography and handwriting analysis.
And you found a match, did you?
Yes, Miss Murphy's matched the shopping list because it starts off blue, then it goes purple, and then it goes yellowy orange.
Very good. And what about the handwriting?
Miss Murphy's handwriting was the closest to the one that was found on the floor.
Very good evidence. And that was found at the crime scene?
Yes. I was in the shed, but I had permission off Mr. Bob because I needed some oil for my brakes on my bike.
So you needed some oil?
Yeah, but I didn't touch anything else.
OK. OK, guys, we've looked at all the circumstantial evidence There's only one way to find out for sure, and that's the DNA. If we could have a look at the DNA evidence, please. Thank you very much. OK. And we can see there's a clear match there. You see track 5? So whoever track 5 is.
That would be Mr. Evans.
Mr. Evans. Constable, could you arrest Mr. Evans for us, please?
Mr. Evans, you're under arrest for burglary. You didn't have to say anything, but it may harm your defence if you do not mention when questioned something which you later rely in court. Anything you do say may be given in evidence.
It's a fair cop. I suppose I should have expected it in the circumstances. Pesky kids.
With the excitement of the investigation receding and Mr. Evans led away for questioning, how successful has this project been in engaging the children with science?
Because I spent
Our teaching team reflect on the week's events.
It was just fairly daunting at the beginning because just the logistics of setting up a crime scene and making it all real. And
once you start involving lots of people around school, then it becomes time-consuming, doesn't it?
And also because you've got to tell them what their part in the crime was, and so that everybody was speaking the same story, we did have to, as you say, spend a lot of time talking to all the suspects, really.
One thing I didn't like, a few times they'd say, a few would come up and say, is it real or isn't? And I said, it is real, and I didn't like the fact I was lying.
I didn't say it was real, but what I did say was, with a look of disappointment, is, does that mean we can't do all this footprinting and fingerprinting? And then they sort of cottoned on that they had to play the game, really. And that seemed to work.
OK, it's left and right, so it can't be Mr. Barnett.
Eliminate Mr. Barnett. Why do you think that?
Because Mr. Barnett's always using his crutches.
Good point, very good point.
The scenes of crime officer outside was just brilliant because he just had so much that he brought to the whole situation. And he was actually very good at it, he was very confident. And the other resources, the suits and the shoes and having a police car there was just excellent. That really made it, first thing in the morning, as soon as the children arrived, it had impact.
We were obviously using kit that we would not normally have in the school, and we borrowed the microscopes from a local secondary school, and we are very lucky we borrowed the electrophoresis kit from the local secondary college.
We've certainly had a lot of support from outside agencies, but they've all been very willing, and I think they've all seen it as positive experience for them.
OK, guys, just need to talk about the evidence that you've recovered and your observations and notes as well. They adopted a very scientific approach. They tested theories out and they took measurements, and they were photographing their findings and recording their findings, which is just about everything we do at real crime scenes as real crime scene investigators. So I'm hoping that they've got as much out of it as I have today. I found the whole day to be absolutely fabulous.
So we can see, because I spent so much time on the crime scene, taking groups out. I mean, that was the most magical part to me. And they were just all so totally involved in it.
I'm really quite jealous because I would have loved to have been able to go out with a group. I would have liked to have experienced that with at least one group.
So which activities do they particularly enjoy? Which ones do you think they got a lot out of science-wise?
The digital microscope, I think, was good. We could have done it with more of them, but I think it was good for us to learn how to use it as well, because we'd actually practically got to do it with the children.
It looks a bit like kind of a woolly glove or like a jumper.
Put a little bit onto your chromatography paper. That's fine, lovely.
Chromatography with Smarties was just lovely before they actually started to look at the pens. And I think the fact that it was quite easy to do and the results were instant was fantastic.
So can you see how each pen has made a different pattern of colours?
Oh yeah, it's got a bit of purpley and a bit of a bit of yellow.
They had the opportunity, didn't they, to see equipment that they hadn't seen before and use techniques they hadn't seen before, because often things are quite repetitive, aren't they? And it just opened the box for them of what is possible.
I think it makes science come to life. I think sometimes subjects can be seen in separate little boxes. And we're moving away from that, and I think this is science in a real situation.
DNA, I think, was just something a bit special for them, and it really, the icing on the cake, just raised the level of what they were doing.
DNA is like a long string. In fact, the DNA in one cell in your body, if we stretched it out, would be taller than you.
They seem to understand it very well. They know what DNA is, and I think the world they live in the media, they've heard about DNA fingerprinting. So it was really exciting for them to actually have the opportunity to do it themselves.
I think they learnt with the DNA particularly how precise they've got to be. That moving on to science in secondary school isn't like science in primary school. They've got to be able to control and use small amounts of things.
And we're constantly saying with their investigations, well, was it fair? Were you accurate? And it just set it all in context, didn't it? They had to be.
This is what we call the marker. And this is a special sample that will tell us that our experiment has worked. So we have to put this in well 1.
We found the equipment, and there was quite a lot of it, quite daunting. The children took it in their stride, didn't they, actually? They were very good with the micropipettes. But you do need a lot of adult hands to make sure they're doing things correctly at the correct time.
So what was the one you put into lane 2?
Crime scene.
So it was one of these, not this one. Where's your marker then? Right. I think we're going to be a bit muddled here.
As thinking skills coordinator in school, I do think we've perhaps missed some opportunities for the children to do some deeper thinking. I think it was quite evident this afternoon when the evidence was being prepared how quickly they were able to jump from one suspect to another.
Mr. Evans.
Mr. Barnett.
He's got 2 plasters on his fingers.
Yeah, but it might have been 2 people.
Yeah.
A bit of fibre on the nail.
We've not only got to look closer and recover our forensic science, we have to preserve it.
The DNA we have belongs to each of these suspects.
We can see there's a clear match there.
That would be Mr. Evans.
Mr. Evans.
So we've had a very successful project. The children have thoroughly enjoyed it, but I guess the big question is, would we do it again?
We would all do it again, wouldn't we? I think we've all really enjoyed it. I thought we've all learnt a lot from it. The children have loved it.
I think it would be a lot easier to do it again now, planning and the ideas.
But can we repeat a crime scene again, say 12 months down the line? Or have we got to think of something totally different to engage next year's Year 6?
I think Year 5 might be expecting a crime scene for next year. What do you think?
Murder, kidnapping, any ideas?